Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to HR Empowerment. It's Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. Our guest today is Mimi Nicklin, founder of Empathy Everywhere. Ooh, I love this. And best-selling author of Empathy at Work. She has reached millions of people with her mission to reconnect our workplaces and world through empathy. I love that. Welcome, Mimi. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here, Wendy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Tell our listeners just about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Oh, wow. Well, Wendy, I always think that this journey found me rather than the other way around. So I was a corporate girl for a long time. I worked in marketing and a very long story short, but in 2018, I took over a business that was a smaller business, which was incredibly difficult to manage. And at that time, I had a conversation with a business coach actually about how do I do this? I felt very overwhelmed, I can remember. Um, and when I met that business coach, she was asking me at that time about my leadership style. And I was talking about intuition. I was talking about being a very intuitive leader. And she stopped me and she asked me a question that in the end changed my life because she said, Mimi, is it intuition or is it empathy? And Wendy, I remember thinking, well, no, I mean, it can't be. It can't be empathy. What's empathy got to do with leadership?
Everything.
Well, now we know, right? So I left that, I remember very clearly, I left that coffee meeting and I started to research what empathy was. It's funny for me to think that at the time I really had given it very little thought.
Right.
But of course that then, again, very short version, but it led me to change my life because once I found out what empathy was and its impact on leadership and our businesses and HR, I mean, I could never stop looking at it. I could never stop writing. So I wrote my first book. I've just finished my fourth. And that's why I say that this journey found me, because it's not like I woke up one day and thought, do you know what? I'm going to become an empathy advocate. But indeed, that is what happened.
And now you're a world's leading empathy advocate. I love it so much. So I'm just going to just jump right in as the HR lady and ask some questions related to
Yeah.
the workplace, because I truly do believe that so many of the problems that we have in the workplace are related to the lack of empathy, the lack of
Mm,
leadership. And, leaders is such an undefined title, right? Because it is, people think they're leaders because of where they're put on the org chart, but that's just a role. It's not an action. So
mm.
now, empathy in leadership and HR is discussed widely now, but how do you define it in the context of real workplace leadership? And then my
Mm.
second question on that is also, what's the difference between empathy and emotional intelligence?
Oh, such good questions. So let's start with the definition. For me, empathy is really very simple. It is fundamentally perspective taking. And, there are some more complicated versions of what empathy can be. But Wendy, as you just said, or you sort of were alluding to, shall we say, there's a lot of complexity around what leaders are and how they manage other people. And I think that we're failing so dismally at empathy overall, not all of us, right? That we needn't complicate it. We can keep it very simple. This is the ability to understand the other people that are running your team, your business with you, to be able to see things as they do, to recognize that they might see the same thing that you do differently. So we're fundamentally talking about human insight. We're talking about understanding others. It is definitely not a soft skill. There's nothing soft about it. It's
Right. Thank you so much for saying that.
yes, I should put like an emoji on the screen, right? It's a hard skill. It's hard to find. It's hard to master. It has very, very hard business impact. For example, 21% higher profit in organizations that are empathetically led, 68% higher levels of engagement. We can come back to the data later. But fundamentally, I define that very much as a hard skill that is connecting humans. Without it, very difficult to motivate anyone. I mean, how can I
Right.
motivate you if I don't understand you?
Yeah, 100%. I actually was looking up some statistics getting ready for this too, and I found one in Forbes that said 61% say empathetic leadership supports innovation
Mm,
versus, without having empathetic leadership, you're only going to have 13% support of innovation. And isn't that what we need in this world? Is we need to continue
mm.
to be innovative so that we can be competitive and that we can have of revenue and a bottom line that we can help people hopefully change the world. So
Yeah, I
speaking
mean, you
of,
you can't have empathy. Sorry, you can't have innovation, can you? If you're self-censoring, and I think that's
exactly,
a really important thing perhaps for your audience to also just consider, which is we can only innovate when there's psychological safety, right? When there's safety in an
right?
environment, because otherwise I'm not going to tell you my ideas, right? If I don't
Yeah,
think you're going to listen to them. So
right.
that connection between empathy and innovation is incredibly direct, actually.
Yeah, 100%, because I might have a really great idea as your employee. And if I don't believe that you care about me or that you care about how I got to this decision, then I might not share it with you. I might start my own business and do it, or I might go to your competitor and get paid $1 more an hour, or not even, it's not even about the money. It's about, hey, I want to feel where I want to work where I feel that I'm supported and that people actually care about me. So, geez,
Mm.
you think that this all would be like common sense, but we know that common sense isn't common. So, I love your mission. Your mission is to reconnect 1 million people in empathy. How do you, again, see empathy impacting the organizational performance, as we just talked about, but also retention and psychological safety in 2026?
Well, I mean, I have so much data in my head. I'm like a data machine when it comes to
I
empathy.
love
But,
it.
so what we do know is that people are 54% less likely to resign when there's empathy. So when you ask about retention, we're seeing a far higher percentage of people willing to stay. And that's even when it's in response to difficult situations. So, for example, when the business is going through tough times, perhaps salaries are pressured, people are still willing to stay. So there is a very direct connection between empathetic leadership and retention. And as I touched on earlier, a very direct impact towards engagement at 68%. So very high. Beyond that, 79%. And most of my data, by the way, is from Gallup, most of it.
I
I
love
also take
Gallup.
some, yes, the best. I also take a lot from the Business Solver report. So if anyone's wondering, but 79% of people say that they will work longer hours out of choice for an empathetic leader. So I always share that, Wendy, for the sake of an example for your audience to say, if you have a boss who you really feels they listen to you, they're interested in your opinion, they acknowledge you, they value you, right? When that leader comes to you on a Friday and says, "Hey, Wendy, could you just stay an extra hour to help me finish this for the board?" You're like, "Sure, no problem. Let me just quickly let my husband know, and no problem at all." Versus when you have a boss that never listens to a word you say,
Right.
doesn't value you, doesn't acknowledge you, when that boss says, "Hey, could you stay an hour?" You're like, "Oh, gotta walk the dog." You don't want to stay.
I got to
So
do anything else but stay with you for one more
literally
minute than
anything.
I have to.
Exactly. So that's at 79%, and nearly 80% of people um, say that their sense of purpose and performance is impacted positively by empathetic leadership. So again, really high numbers of people, when they're asked, just very simply, they can define this, Wendy. This is not like super complex human psychology.
Hmm.
This is like when you say to an employee, "Hey, if your boss listens well, will you work harder?" Yes. It's very linear. People
Right.
fully understand this. It's not a complex science. As you said earlier, I think it's just a common sense, really, but it's about how we treat humans like humans and recognize humans as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, listening as a boss, as a leader, as a manager, listening could help you also deliver tough conversations where I value you, I want you on my team, but we don't have budget to give you more money. What
Mm,
else would it be important to you? It could be flexible work hours, right? But if a boss is actually, and I hate using the word boss, but if a boss is
mm,
actually listening, they can say, all right, I have to deliver this conversation that we're not giving raises this year, or we're not giving full bonuses, or whatever it might be, but I can give you a more flexible work schedule, or I can give you the, Fridays off and 4-day work week. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I always say to people, Wendy, that assumption is our greatest enemy to
Oh,
performance.
yes, it is.
Because, and especially in organizations where we have multiple generations and there are some gaps between, the old and the young, the top and the bottom. Because often when I speak to not only men, this is not always about gender, but there are just more men at the top, particularly in Asia, where I spend a lot of time. When you ask those gentlemen at the top of organizations, why people want pay rises, they will always assume, I guess quite simply, that it's because they want more money. But what we've shown in lots of our research is that young people, often the reason they want money is actually not for the kind of cash in hand, but for example, maybe they want to take a master's, or an MBA. So exactly to your point, when you're using empathy in those decisions, you can say, listen, I can't give you a pay rise right now, but tell me, what does it mean to you? And when that young person says, well, I'm desperate to do my MBA, that HR leader or that other leader can say, well, listen, that might be something I can help you with because that doesn't come out of the same, budget as salaries. And actually, we have a partnership with a local business school and we can look at that. So, as you said, you can deliver really bad and difficult news with understanding, with empathy. It becomes a data set. So your chances of successful negotiation or overcoming sort of complex conversations goes up.
Right. Magically, right? Not really magically, but it's because you put the work in. Speaking
Mm.
of, Asia, and I'm in the United States, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling you from Kuala Lumpur. So it is 11 o'clock at night. I think you're probably at like 9 in the morning or
Yeah,
something. I
10 a.m. in the morning
There we
here.
go. Yeah. We're in like different. I mean, in 1 hour, I'll be in tomorrow and you'll still be in my yesterday.
It's so cool. I just love it. And I hope our listeners appreciate that we have an international guest here, internationally best-selling author. You've recently shared stages with Bill Gates, Steve Wozniak, Stephen Bartlett, and even appeared live on BBC to 85 million viewers as a leading voice in listening-led leadership. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Thank
My next question is, knowing all of that, meeting all these people, being around the world, what do you believe are the most common barriers leaders face, no matter where they're calling in from, when trying to lead with empathy? And how can
you.
HR help them overcome that?
Mm. So let's take the first bit first. I would say that there are two great enemies and one kind of sub enemy of empathy. The two biggest are low time and high stress. And I suspect, Wendy, if we asked your audience who are listening to us in their cars somewhere today, to raise their hands if they have low time and high stress, uh, probably 99% are going to say, yeah, that's me, right? So it's very hard to access empathy, which is built into the prefrontal cortex in your brain. This is a skill set. It is a choice. You choose to use it. It's hard to access those skills when you're under a huge amount of pressure with very little time because of the way the brain works. I don't think we have time to probably unpack that today, but there is a very clear neuroscience around this. This is not about, personality. It's about how the brain works. And then I mentioned there's kind of a sub impact, which I would say is ego. But ego is often perceived as a very negative thing, like, oh, they have an ego. But actually, ego is just confidence, it's ability, it's experience as a leader. And so often what happens when our junior members come to talk to us in experience, in positive intention, we might cut them off. We might solve their problems for them. We might come up with a solution before they finish telling us the problem. Because in experience, we've seen it all before. Now, the reality is you probably have, and you're probably right, but that's not the point, right? The point is that they need to be heard, they need to be acknowledged, and more often than not, acknowledgement is more important than action. And I think leaders tend to be in this, mill of I must solve, I must solve, I must solve as a mindset versus I must listen first as an approach to those conversations. So I would say high stress, low time, and ego or experience tend to get in the way. So that's the first part of that question. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you explained ego as well, that it is about confidence and experience, number one, but then it's about how we're using it and how we're projecting. So people might need a little bit of a, touch up on their rough edges to say, yes, I'm the expert, but I need to deliver this in a more empathetic way where people feel that, A, I'm listening to them so that they listen to me as well.
Because you know what, in the end, Wendy, nobody will ever listen to you if you haven't listened to them.
Right?
So when if you just think in your personal life for a moment, take it outside the workplace for a second and think about your best friend, right, or your sister or brother or somebody who's close to you, and you meet them over lunch, and you're trying to tell them about this problem at work, and they keep interrupting you, say, "Well, you just got to talk to your boss. You've just got to," and you're like, "You are not listening to me, right? I cannot accept your advice because I don't feel you have heard my reality." So people won't listen to you until you listen to them. Would be kind of my first piece around that. And then you asked me about what HR can do.
Yes.
Um, I think there are three parts of this really in all of this work around empathetic leadership, what I normally call listening-led leadership. The first is awareness. So making sure that people know what this is. So thank you, Wendy, for having me, because that's exactly what we're doing.
Right.
Making sure that more leaders and more teams understand this is not a soft skill, it's not an emotion, this is not something, loose, and it's not about kindness or niceness. So awareness would be the first one. That can be through podcasts, right? Like this, it can be in webinars or training sessions, whatever it is. The second phase is intention, because these choices are intentional. I can choose to listen. I can choose to make eye contact. I can choose not to. And then the third area would be around accountability or measurement, which would be, there's kind of very easy entry to this all the way through to, full KPI analysis. But fundamentally saying if you do not measure things, they cannot manifest. So how do you put this into your team, either as a cultural value, as a KPI, as an expectation, as a learned behavior in your organization? But if you do not formalize the accountability for that, as I mentioned earlier when I talked about low time and high stress, those things will take over and these skill sets will fall down. So I would say it's awareness, intention, and accountability.
I love it. I am in love with metrics, KPIs and SMART goals, and I think every HR professional should be. But we have to make sure that we actually understand our business and our industry. And I love the fact of saying, okay, if we're going to start implementing empathy into our organization, kind of as a mandate for everybody, I would hope everybody in the world would use empathy in their company values to say, not only do we use respect and professionalism, trust and transparency, but we are all learning to be empathetic here. But if we said, okay, tomorrow we're going to start with empathy, we have to do training, as you mentioned, we should start measuring, all right, on this day, we mandated empathy, especially from our managers, and what has changed? Has retention improved? Has, complaints decreased? Has revenue improved? You can't just snap your fingers, right, Mimi? It's going to take a long time. If you are in a bad, um, maybe a high turnover situation now, it's not going to change just immediately, but it will change slowly, right?
Mm. Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I mean, I fully agree, Wendy, but I think what's interesting is in a micro level. So I fully agree with you from a macro point of view. It's going to take time to turn around a difficult culture or a failing retention score. However, I often say to leaders, if you get some of the basics of this right tomorrow, you will see a change tomorrow. Because when even again, take it out of the workplace for a minute, put it into a coffee shop. When you go into the coffee shop tomorrow and order your latte, and the person says like, "Hi, how are you?" And you actually look them in the eye, use their name if they have a name badge, and look at them and say, "I'm fine, thank you, Mimi. How are you?" They will go, I'm okay, thank you. Right? They
Yeah.
are so surprised. So in that micro moment, you actually really begin to shift quite big things quite quickly. So I agree, measurement takes time. You're going to have to monitor this 6, 12, 18, 24 months. However, if you're listening to this and you think you're not great at empathy, you're not a very good listener, You can make some of these shifts literally today at work with your kids, with your husband, with your wife, and start to see really relationship shifts almost immediately.
And I would encourage our listeners to check out some training on our platform for active listening and what that really means, because it's not just looking at somebody. I know so many people that unfortunately, like, okay, I'm going to fake it and I'm going to pretend I'm listening just so I could find a spot in the conversation to now put into my opinion, even though I just devalued and ignored everything they said. So, folks, active listening really, really does mean active listening. And, for me, myself, I have a little bit of ADHD, so I have to take notes. But that's also sometimes incredibly disruptive and disrespectful. So if it's something incredibly serious, as the HR lady, I let the listener or the other personer know, listen, this is very important, and I am going to jot down notes and I'll summarize this at the end so that we're on the same page. But if it's something that's not like going to lead to an investigation in the workplace, and it's just like, hey, they're just trying to tell you about their weekend, or unfortunately, going to somebody's funeral or something like that, you probably don't need to write down notes, and make sure you're looking at them, turning your cell phone over, turning your ringer off,
Mhm.
making sure you even turn off. For me, I make sure I shut my computer down, or at least close my laptop, or turn my monitor off. So I say, no, it's me and you. We're uninterrupted. The last piece of advice I would give on there, sometimes it's just not the time or place. And you could tell that person, I want to listen to you. I want to hear this. This is not the time or place. Can we meet over there in 20 minutes in my office or in that cubicle over there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that expectation management is so important in that way because the gap between expectation and reality is disappointment.
Yeah.
So if you reduce the gap between expectation and reality, you will always do better. And again, I think that's the same in the workplace and out. So I have a little girl, she's 8, and sometimes she'll come home from school, she wants to tell me something, but I have to meet Wendy, right, to do my podcast. And I know I only have 3 minutes. Rather than brush her off and say, babe, I can talk to you later, I will give her one of those 3 minutes. And in that 1 minute, there is nothing else in the world but her. And I will look at her, her little 8-year-old, and I'll say, babe, mummy's got 1 minute. In that 1 minute, I want to really understand what you want to tell me. So, what can you tell me in a short time that mummy can understand? And then, as soon as I finish, we're going to carry on. And I've been doing that since she's like 2 years old because I've been a working mum always. And she can do it, Wendy. She's extremely adept at she can empathize with me as I am empathizing with her. She can understand and she can then feel fulfilled and feel acknowledged and feel seen in a very short period of time and then leave after that minute with her head held high, feeling like mummy will come back in a minute, you know,
Right.
versus those millions of children whose parents don't bother. And then they go through life and they grow up thinking that nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
And I promise you, you said you have some active listening training on your platform, which everybody should take. And they should go into that saying, in less than 120 seconds, you can really deeply listen to someone. That doesn't mean you can understand the entire context, but
Right.
you can make a connection in less than 120 seconds, and everybody has 120 seconds.
Right. And then you just jot down some notes and say, okay, I'm going to get back to you on the rest of that, but here's the conversation right here. Here are the actions that I owe you and that you owe me. Let's reconvene in 2 days with more information. I just did that last night at a late client meeting that I've got to finish after this podcast, sending all the information that I said, yes, I can do that. Not today. I will get it to you tomorrow. And they were like, that's fine. We don't need it till Thursday. So it was absolutely perfect. I was going to ask you, and maybe you have another one, and to share a case where empathy training or listening led leadership, changes engagement. You just gave one with your daughter. But if you
Mm.
do have any other cases that you would want to share that says, we did training and it changed the client's world.
So yeah, I mean, I have many because I'm very lucky to work with lots of wonderful Fortune 500 companies. But I will tell you one I've just done because it was in the Maldives. And Wendy, who doesn't want to work in the Maldives, right? So if you don't know where the Maldives is, you need to Google just a picture while we're talking, and you'll be like, yeah, she went to a good place. So I worked in the Maldives for a hotel group who have 8 5-star luxury hotels in the Maldives. And these hotels are resorts, right? So they're all on private islands because the Maldives is many, many islands made up. And what we did there is they didn't have huge problems. This was not a struggling organization. They're actually a very successful organization, but they're very forward thinking. So they came to me and said, listen, I think we're pretty good at EQ, at empathy and leadership, at listening, but we want to be the best in our industry. How do we do that? And so we did an audit. We audited them all 8 hotels, which is about 150 leaders across
Wow.
those. Yeah, it's big because there's 8 huge hotels. So there's,
Hmm.
obviously VP down to sort of GM level. Um, so we did the audit. And in that, we could find out which parts of the organization were listening better than others, and where and when and to who. So when they were struggling with listening versus when they weren't. And what I learned through that data was that they were very good at hearing what the problems were. But because of high stress, very demanding industry, they were very bad at acknowledging that they had heard. They had heard, but they weren't very good at telling their teams that they had heard or that that had
Ah,
form of acknowledgement, right? So we did training around that over a period of about 12 weeks across, much smaller groups to make sure people had lots of chance to practice. And then we did our first follow-up survey after that. And absolutely, you can see the scores have shifted and that people are feeling more acknowledged. And of course, that then leads to higher levels of motivation and conversation and indirectly better customer experience as well, because now the staff are happier, the customers are happier too. So there's many I could give examples on, Wendy. This is just one I did recently. Whenever you create more connection from the top, the middle, the bottom, your indicators improve. Because as people, when we are seen, we rise, always.
right. And we have better morale. In fact, Ernst and Young did a major survey, a study, and they said that 86% of employees said empathetic leadership boosted
Mhm.
their morale, or the opposite. And 87% of employees said it's essential for empathetic leadership to foster an inclusive environment, which we need so, so much, I would say worldwide. And then on top of that, we have just so much going on in the world. Economic pressure, burnout. We kind of talked about that in the beginning. One other piece of research that I actually just discovered recently was from researchgate.net, and it said that empathy-based leadership significantly improves employee retention. Hello. By creating supportive, inclusive environments, especially in high pressure industries like creative sectors and hospitality, hotel, restaurant, like you just mentioned. So, my final question for you before we wrap up is, in a time of economic pressure and burnout, what's one empathetic leadership practice that every manager can start implementing this week?
So I would say it's very simple. I would say it's to listen first. I think really, next time you go into a meeting, before you jump in and talk about all the things you need to be done, listen to the people around you and then bring that mentality into every conversation you have. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not asking you to listen to people's life stories. I know how busy you are. Okay. But we're talking about listening first as a mindset to build relationships, to build your ecosystem, to help them do better at their jobs, but also to get you promoted quicker because people promote the people that have the best relationships. So if I had to give one tip, it would be to master that, master the art of listening first at work, at home, in all areas of your life.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And I wanted to just also back that up of saying at home as well, please. Because if you are being empathetic at home to not just your family, but your neighbors, your community, we're all in this world together, but it's going to help reduce your stress in the end back in the workplace, even if you don't have an empathetic leader. And then the other thing I would say is, I don't care what your role is, you do not have to be a manager to be an empathetic leader, right, Mimi? You can lead
Absolutely.
from within, lead from where you're at. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
100%. I often tell people that everybody is leading somebody. It doesn't matter if you are the cleaner or the CEO or somewhere in between. Your impact on others is your choice. Everyone is leading somebody. So make that decision today, every day, and just see what happens in life, because I think it'll all be beneficial.
I love this. This has been so amazing. I love talking to a worldwide superstar. Tell us a little bit about your book, Empathy at Work.
So Empathy at Work was my second book. It's on Amazon, so you can find it there. It changed my life because it has really enabled me to open up conversation about all the things we've spoken about, Wendy. And I'm very excited that my next book, which is called The Connection Prescription, comes out in May in New York. So just about 3 months to go, 4 months to go. And that one really looks not only at how listening first is the prescription for connecting your life and your leadership, but also how it impacts our longevity as human beings, because everything we've spoken about today is a pro-social skill set. We need these skills to survive, not just to thrive in the workplace.
I love this. So, how can we connect with you so we can learn more about when the new book comes out and just about empathy in general?
So you can find me at Mimi Nicklin on any platform, basically, or you can find me via my website, which is www.empathyeverywhere.co.
Absolutely love that. I will make sure that her information is in the podcast notes. Thank you so much for joining us. You truly are in a league of your own. I appreciate your time today, and I hope that you get a chance to relax from your travels as well.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for starting your day with me.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and let us know what we can do to help you.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.